It's all about the macro productions.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack-Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him.
Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the CS hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you are watching us on Rumble, Band.video, YouTube, or you are listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate your support as we march forward 6 years in. Hopefully you have rated the show. Give us 5 stars real quick if you think we've earned it as we fight this ridiculous algorithm battle. The website is macroaggressions.io. You can check out everything we're doing there. Activistpost.com, naturalblaze.com. Get some of your information and your news over there. We appreciate our sponsors because if we didn't have them, we couldn't make this show work. I asked Tim James before Christmas if he had any leads on companies that make good grounding mats. And he said, yeah, I do. Actually, a company called Ground Lux does that. And he's like, I've got one underneath my feet right now. So I went out and bought a few and gave them away for Christmas, and I've got one underneath my feet right now as well. So if you're interested, if you are in the market for a grounding mat or grounding sheets even, they have sheets that are fitted sheets. They're 90% organic cotton and 10% silver, so silver fiber. So you can, and they're machine washable and everything like that, just like normal sheets. So you can have a grounding mat for your bed, and you can have a grounding mat under your desk. And I need one under my desk because I've got 3 computers and lights and all kinds of electronics, and I would love to go out and touch grass, but it's the middle of winter and I'm in Denver, so it's tough for me. So if you are in the same situation I'm in, you can go to groundlux.com and use the discount code MACRO to save yourself a little bit of money on it. The link is down in the show notes, by the way, as well. And also, for those of you who are interested, I got hooked up with Replace Your Mortgage by Texas Larry, my Legal Shield guy, and I'm really glad I did because I had no idea that there was a system out there. Well, I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know the ins and outs. I didn't know the details, and I didn't know that it was something that was accessible for people like us. But if you are interested in paying off if you own a home, let's start there. If you own a home with equity in it, you got good credit, and you got positive cash flow, and you're good with your money, you may be a candidate for this. You can pay your home off in 5 to 7 years. And this is it's not the traditional stuff. It's not make an extra payment or refinance your house or recast it's none of those things. You don't need somebody to help you with that. That you could do on your own. That's easy. This is something totally different. It's a bank killer, and it's not magic. It's just math. That's all it is. You have to understand compound interest and how all that works. And when you do that and you're able to flip it into your benefit, things change. So if you are interested and you tick all those boxes, you can go to the website that they built specifically for us and just watch this video. It's a 20-minute video. I can't fill you in on all of it in 2 minutes here. You're going to have to check it out yourself. Go to wipeoutyourmortgagenow.com. It's easy. Wipeoutyourmortgagenow.com. watch the video. Just watch it, and then if you have questions, they'll take care of you there. But this company has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. It's not a scam. They've done this for 10,000 plus people. It will change your life. It really is possible to do it. You just need to understand the math behind it. These guys can help you out. Go to wipeoutyourmortgagenow.com. All right. I think it's possible that we have covered every single one of the health-related simulations that those lunatics at Johns Hopkins Medical Center have put forth until now. I mean, this is one that slipped through the cracks. But we're going to talk about it because it's extremely relevant to where we are now. Because what they were planning with this abstract called Bulls, Bears, and Birds, Preparing the Financial Industry for an Avian Influenza Pandemic. That's the name of the half-day symposium on avian influenza for senior leaders and decision makers from the financial sector who were responsible for business continuity, health, and security. So you go, whoa, hang on a sec. When did this happen? Well, this Bulls, Bears, and Birds event took place in 2005. So it's like, well, did they need it? I mean, did they? Well, I don't know. You tell me. They didn't have an avian influenza outbreak, though they have been trying to push that for a long, long time. But just 3 years later, did they have a catastrophe with the banks? They did. It looked a little different. It wasn't virus related. It was it was another form of virus. It was central banking virus, and all of the inflated housing market and all of that good stuff. But the same thread runs through all of this, right? It's we're going to talk about what could happen in the future with some epidemic, right? Some pandemic that's going to come around and it's going to kill everybody. And we need to prepare for it. We need to plan accordingly. And so they've done these in similar with similar themes. But it's like, how do we prepare for the media messaging and the overwhelming health needs of everybody rushing the emergency room, right? So that's one version where they've done the role play tabletop exercises and work through all those things. They say, well, in this situation, we would have supply chain issues and we would have this and we would have that. This event that they put on was different in that it was specifically for the people on Wall Street. It's like, what happens to the, fuck the people. What happens to the money when something like this happens? Now, of course, the underlying theme of this is that some avian influenza situation is just going to sprout out of nowhere, sweep across the world, just, as nature does, and then it was no fault of anybody's, but we have to plan accordingly just in case, right? That's the sales pitch. Now, we are well past that. We have been doing this for a while, and we understand that this is problem reaction. This is not, what if some catastrophe happened in the future? This is, we are planning a catastrophe in the future. This is what you need to know when it comes. In the lead up to it, this is how your messaging needs to be. This is how you need to position yourself. And this is how, when it starts, this is how the structure of the operation will work, right? So you have these tabletop exercises to bring in what they did. The event brought together experts and leaders from the medical, public health, and business continuity communities, financial communities roughly, and to apprise the financial industry leaders on the threat of avian flu and to offer suggestions regarding what the financial industry could do to prepare and respond. So this is the abstract. I'll just read it. This is from their own words, right? Bulls, Bears, and Birds, Preparing the Financial Industry for an Avian Influenza Pandemic. Okay. It's the event brought together leaders and experts and leaders from the medical, public health, business continuity, and financial communities to apprise financial industry leaders on the threat of avian influenza and to offer suggestions regarding what the financial industry could do to prepare and respond. Because everybody knows the financial industry is really good at responding to avian flu pandemics, right? What are we doing? What are we talking about? Okay, so the authors of this study are the same cast of characters that are behind everything else. Thomas Inglesby, Tara O'Toole of Dark Winter 2001, Atlantic Storm 2005, Clade-X 2018, right? Jennifer Nuzzo, Beth Malden, Nora Lean, Gigi Quick Gronval, Eric Toner. So they ran this drill 20 years ago in 2005. And in 2000, and not for nothing, but in 2005, I remember I was in Asia. I was in and out of Asia, and they were having bird flu issues. I mean, it wasn't a major thing, but they were treating it like it was a major thing, you know, with checking people's temperatures at the airport to make sure they didn't have like high temperatures and things like that. And I know this because I went through the airport in Shanghai with a high temperature and was totally convinced I was going to get like total recalled out of there. And I was going to be like, they're like, how long are you in Shanghai? I'm like, 2 weeks. And then they just start flipping out and they realize I have a fever and then I'm in a chicken coop for the rest of my life. So I know that they were doing this in 2005. They were talking about it in Asia, but it really kind of fizzled out. We never really got the avian flu world tour that we were promised. You know, I don't know. I guess the PR campaign fizzled or something. Something didn't work. Timing wasn't right. Control structure might not have been in place yet. I don't know. It could be a test run. But when they talk about these things like avian flu, I mean, it's going to come back. I mean, you know, you get the bat flu and some sort of variation of this. You know, they tried monkeypox and that didn't score well with the the people that they tabletopped it with, and they said, well, you know, everyone loves monkeys and they're not really scary. Like, you got to get a scary, like spiderpox would be way different than monkeypox. Monkeypox is adorable. Like, you know, you can get monkeypox in Cancun, it seems like, but I don't know. So I'm assuming that they're going to do this in some form or fashion. The reason why I say this is extremely important is because the financial industry is going to be kept abreast of this in advance of it, before it happens, right? So there's so much money at stake. And when you're talking about these decisions, and we saw what happened with COVID, and they get the excuse to print tens of trillions of dollars into existence and you know, over the course of 3 months, which is crazy. So you know that if there's some global health component, it's going to be tied to the financial industry. I mean, because this Venn diagram overlaps so easily. There's so much money in healthcare, and where does that money come from? Well, you know, all these companies are publicly traded. Well, you have to look to Wall Street, and it's like, all right, well, we have to talk about the money behind the companies that are in the healthcare industry as well, right? So it's not just as simple as saying, this doesn't impact Wall Street, this is a healthcare issue. It's like, well, who's publicly traded? All the healthcare companies, all the vaccine manufacturers, all the big pharma companies. And that depends on Wall Street. So they're going to need to be kept up to speed on this. So they were at, so what they did is the same team that they used for Atlantic Storm in 2005, just around the same time they did this, they ran Atlantic Storm, which was germ warfare in Europe. And of course, as we know, vaccines are the solution. They're always the solution, no matter what it is. Guy stubs his toe, vaccines are the solution. So because what they do is work backwards, starting with vaccines are the solution, and then how do we create a scary chain of events that then predicates us saying, see, we told you vaccines are the solution. So they're all Johns Hopkins University, the Center for Civilian Biodefense Strategies, but they've moved it. Did you know they moved it? They did. It's now known as, and it has been known for a little while, but It's now known as UPMC, Center for Health Security. This is for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, though it's still based in Baltimore. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the geography of the East Coast of the United States, Pittsburgh and Baltimore aren't really close to each other. So it's not like Pittsburgh's in western Pennsylvania. Baltimore, it's on the coast, on the East Coast. So it's not like, it's a very unusual sort of relationship. They focus on pandemics, emerging infectious diseases, and broader public health emergencies. Okay, so the people from Johns Hopkins Center in Baltimore are now part of something else called University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, but it's also in Baltimore. Just for geography purposes, just so you know. So because when you hear these things like University of Pittsburgh, you're going to think, oh, they did this in Pittsburgh. They didn't. It's just because. So what they did, they get federal funding for bioterrorism. By the way, the people who started the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, UMPC Medical Center for Health Security, the two people who are in charge are Tara O'Toole and Tom Inglesby. They're the ones that you keep hearing over and over and over again who are involved in Dark Winter and Atlantic Storm and Clade-X. And the reason why they're involved in that is because they run this company. They're in charge of UPMC, Center for Health Security. And so what they did was they went after federal funding for bioterrorism. And they were like, okay, we'll start this group and then we'll be able to get, like, there's not a huge market for bioterrorism right now, like in 1998 when they started it. When they started the company, the amount of federal funding for bioterrorism in the United States in 1998 was $8 million, which is nothing. Like they'll finance that. You can study gonorrhea in Lebanon with $8 million from the federal government if you just petition them hard enough. So the fact that they were only spending $8 million for federal funding of bioterrorism is kind of, frankly, a little bit alarming. I don't think that it's actually going to go towards bioterrorism. So once Tara and Tom got involved in this in 1998, they then said, well, if we were smart about this, what we could do is we could really kind of create the fear that there is bioterrorism. Like we could say, well, what if Clade-X, or what if Dark Winter, or what if Atlantic Storm? I mean, what if Atlantic Storm is germ warfare in Europe, right? And you're going, is there funding for bioterrorism in the United States? Well, there's $8 million for it. Can we get a piece of that? And they're like, of course we could get a piece of that, but what if instead of just getting a piece of the $8 million, we grew the whole pie and took a piece of that instead? And so that's what they set about to do. And not just them on their own. I don't want to make it, I'm not trying to say that they are responsible for this, but an industry sprouted, which was used to terrify people into fantasizing about what could happen in the future, that there would be some sort of catastrophic germ warfare attack. And if only we had been prepared, things would have been much different. And they do this by creating these simulations, these tabletop exercises. And they do it over and over again. They've done it for 20 years now. And it didn't take long. It really only took the first couple. With Dark Winter, they did that in 2001. And so to give you just an idea of how big of a pie this is now, that they have grown from 8 million in 1998 to just 5 years later, from 8 million to $4.5 billion. Okay? So there is a tremendous amount of money at stake here. Now, that's only 2 years after 9/11. Right? That's more than 20 years ago. The funding was $4.5 billion. So they found themselves one of those gold veins, and you're out there mining. You hope you find one. They found one. They created an industry of fear. They manufactured an industry of fear, created these fake scenarios saying that in the future, there will be bioterrorism that will happen. Now, of course, the irony of all ironies is that the people in the government are the ones that are the boogeymen putting this on. They're the ones behind the bioterrorism. So you can write your papers and have your tabletop exercises about what you're going to do in the event, in the aftermath of a bioterrorism event. But the honest answer is you'll do whatever those in charge tell you to do, because those who are in charge telling you what to do are the ones behind it. It's not going to be some natural occurrence, a bat in a wet market sort of situation. Now, they'll sell that as the reason, but it'll be a lie, as are most things that they tell you. But you can see where they're going with this. You can understand that they grew this. The UPMC is not just some ramshackle little hospital. It's a network of hospitals. Now, it has 20 hospitals, 37,000 employees. And they need to know that, their UPMC Center for Health Security is set up to scare the shit out of the general public and use that as justification to shake them down for more money. Let's talk about the organizations that were represented at the event, because all the devils were there, as you might expect. It's banks and insurance companies, and they were told what would happen to them, what they need to be prepared for in the event of, birds. Birds, everybody. That we've got crazy birds, and they're dying in China, and so now we have to shut down the world. So what does that mean to American Express? Well, American Express was there. They were sitting in this meeting along with AIG and Aetna and the American Stock Exchange and Bank of America and Blackstone and Citigroup and Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank. Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank, they should be sitting there with dunce caps on, because in 2005, both of those banks were insolvent, and there still are. Zombie banks waiting to fall apart. The FBI was sitting in this meeting. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody who knows how this works. The Federal Reserve was there. They had a seat at the table in 2005 to hear what Tom and Tara had to say about the direction they wanted to take the world in the event of some totally random avian flu influenza outbreak, right? That isn't on their calendar somewhere. So they talk about that. They brought in the Ford Foundation because they need to be involved. They brought in Department of Homeland Security, Goldman Sachs, and the White House to make sure they knew what was happening. They brought in JP Morgan's and Lehman Brothers. Of course, Lehman would go out of business 3 years later. Brought in Marsh and McLennan, probably to ask them about 9/11. Possibly. They brought in the New York City Office of Emergency Management. You remember the PIOC? Remember that's the presidential one. This was the New York Office of Emergency Management. This was the one that was abandoned, that was in Trade Center 7. It was abandoned, and when the guys showed up there to get everybody to evacuate, there was hot coffee. There was coffee still steaming from the people that had left. Yeah. So NYU was there. Oracle was there. Larry Ellison. They brought in the Nuclear Threat Initiative to sit in this meeting to talk about what they would do in the case of avian influenza. Northwest Mutual Life Insurance. Pfizer, of course, was there, which would be expected, and they were probably sitting right next to Reuters, who is going to be the media distribution arm that would help to sell the narrative. And of course, next to them would be the World Bank and the World Health Organization. So Wall Street didn't get the avian pandemic that they were role-playing, but 2 years later, these groups would be working together during the 2007 and 2008 crash, which was extremely convenient because you had all these people already sitting down for discussions about what would we do in the event of a catastrophe, right? Now, the catastrophe could change, but maybe what you do in the aftermath of that doesn't. Forced marriages. They didn't mention forced marriages of the banks in this simulation, but forced marriages of the banks is what happened in real life in the aftermath of the housing collapse in 2008, and so they put some of these banks were slated to walk the plank, like Lehman. Others were sort of forced marriage, like you got to go marry your cousin over here, and you got to go take in all of their bad debt, and you guys got to make this work, because otherwise we're going to have a much bigger systemic banking collapse, and that, of course, can't happen because we're not done stealing everything out of America that's not bolted down yet. We still need 2 more decades to do that. So, of course, in 2008, they put the same group of people together. The same representatives are sitting in this meeting talking about the potential of a possible bird flu. Now they've got an economic collapse that they themselves were instrumental in creating, by the way. It's like, how do we save ourselves from this gigantic problem that we created for ourselves? But, and so anyway, it's important that you know who is sitting there, because the people who are sitting there and talking about this and role-playing this, it doesn't matter if they're talking about birds or bears or whatever, like it doesn't matter if you're talking about monkeypox or bird flu or COVID. Same sort of policies are going to apply no matter what. How do we make sure that we retain our money, that we are able to get a lifeline from the federal government and liquidity to make sure that we don't run out of money during this situation? And then in the chaos of it all, how do we make sure that we position ourselves accordingly, right? So that others are impacted more so than we are. So it was co-sponsored by as a UPMC, Deutsche Bank, great, and the Contingency Planning Exchange. Okay, this was this event took place in September 23rd, 2005 in New York City. There were 200 people in attendance. It was a half-day event. There were 100 different organizations that were represented there. I mentioned a lot of them, and you never heard of it. You never heard a damn thing about this, which is fine. They want Wall Street involved in pandemic planning. And what they talked about was, they said, listen, it's H5N1 avian flu, and it has the potential to kill hundreds of millions of people. This is the scenario that they ran, right? So they said the business community is going to need to come together and share resources and do a couple things. They said information technology to help the government solve the problem. And I would put the problem in air quotes, because, it's funny how it's always a problem of their own making. Interesting. But they talked about the information technology. How are we going to help the government solve the problem? They talked about these businesses needing to come together for logistics capacity. How are we going to then manage this process? I mean, this is a worldwide event. We need to make sure that things are ordered and routed, right? So then third on this list is the distribution processes. What's the logistics of this? What's the distribution network going to look like? How are we going to get these things to the people? And when I say logistics and distribution, you could probably say, they would probably tell you, oh yeah, logistics and distribution of food and water and things like that. But if you ask me, I think it's distribution of vaccines. Because whenever they go into these places, the first thing they do before they give them food and water is make sure everybody gets vaccinated. Because we know it's part of a depopulation plan. It's not, it's written in Kissinger's memo in 1974. You can read it for yourself. NSC 200, written on December 10th. Our policy towards the third world is that of depopulation. So when they come in, when the businesses and the healthcare companies and the bankers are plotting about distribution and logistics, it's not to get food and water to people who need it most, because these people are actively trying to murder everybody with their vaccines. So it's not about trying to help people. It's just that it's so much easier to sell this narrative to the general public when you tell them that you're coming to help them as opposed to coming to kill them, right? It just works better. Everybody is a little bit more inclined to go with the program if you say, we're from the government and we're here to get you food and water. And you go, well, I like food and water. Come on in, right? But what they don't tell you is that we also need to inject you with something. It's always the solution to the problem in these scenarios. Always. And that is a feature, not a bug. Because the people at Johns Hopkins, that is the deep state university. That is, the Rockefellers founded this. They funded this into existence. If you're wondering, like, why does all this crazy shit come out of Johns Hopkins? Because the fucking Rockefellers financed it. It is the laboratory for every bad idea that's out there right now. And when you have these events, when you have these, Event 201 and all these things going on, whose fingerprints are all over it? Johns Hopkins Center for Public Health. Always. Always. This is what they do. So again, they're not trying to help Wall Street and make sure that everybody is safely in their bunkers. They said, no, how are we going to profit from this while we also scare the shit out of the public and get them to not only accept our vaccine solution, but fucking demand it. Literally demand it. It's easy to do if you know how people work. You just get them really scared and then offer them the solution. So the presenters in this included Rajiv Venkaya, MD, Senior Director of Biodefense, Homeland Security Council, the White House. Great. What did he ask? What was he talking about in his presentation? Well, he said he sought to engage all federal agencies in the government's response. And you go, all federal agencies? Does every federal agency need to be involved in this? I mean, there's some of them that I don't know. Doesn't seem like it fits to me. But when you understand that it's bigger than that, right? It's not an actual emergency. It's just that when they get to declare something an emergency, it grants them sweeping powers that allow them to do a lot of the things that they would rightly be hanged for doing to you under the guise of emergency use authorization, as we saw with COVID, or just emergency. Right? So everything, hey, listen, it's an emergency. Well, you're not allowed to just come in my house and do this and this and this and this. You're right. Normally, we're not allowed to do this, that, and the other. But it's an emergency. Or as the Nazis would say, it's for your safety. Yeah, I'm fine. My safety is my responsibility. I don't need the government to be in charge of my safety. But you see, it's not about your safety. They don't give a flying fuck about your safety. They're trying to murder you. Always know that in the back of your mind. These people are trying to kill me. I just have to figure out how they're going to do it. So when they have one of these events and they're like, everyone's coming to save us, they're not coming to save you. They're saving themselves. They're plotting for how they can reimagine society in the aftermath of one of these fake emergencies that they unfurl onto the world. Next person speaking there, James Pavitt. He's from the Scowcroft group. Holy fucking shit. Brent Scowcroft was one of the most dangerous people in the Reagan administration. Principal and former deputy director of ops at the CIA. This guy had thoughts. He stood up there and he made references to the Katrina response to disasters with advance notice. He was like, see, Katrina had like, I don't know if you guys remember in 2005. I very well remember Katrina. Part of the reason why and it could have been an engineered storm, and it probably was, but the thing about hurricanes as opposed to earthquakes, as somebody who lived in Southern California for like ever, is that hurricanes, you have 5 days notice that they're coming. Earthquakes, you don't. So there was a component of the Hurricane Katrina story that was like, the national narrative was, oh, this is terrible. But you know what the underlying kind of running theme was y'all had 5 fucking days to plan for this and you just stayed there and did nothing. Like, this is on you. And in the aftermath of that, I don't know if you remember what happened, but it turned into chaos. They started confiscating guns. They were going door to door confiscating guns. They were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, because it was an emergency. So when this guy, this former deputy director of operations at the CIA, is coming up there talking about this with the bankers and in the vein of bird flu, avian flu situations, and he's talking about bringing the nation's scientific talent and economic power together to fix the pandemic. Fix the pandemic? How are you fixing the pandemic? And pardon me if I'm not comforted by the fact that the guy who's the deputy director of operations for the CIA is talking to me about fixing pandemics. Now, the arrogance. Okay, first of all, if there was an actual pandemic, the arrogance of thinking you're like, oh, I'm going to come up here and fix it. The only way you would be that arrogant to stand up there and say that you were going to fix the pandemic is if you knew that it wasn't a pandemic at all, that it was some created catastrophe. If it was an actual pandemic, you wouldn't be asking the CIA what to do. But if it was a contrived one, you'd bring in somebody like, oh, I don't know, the deputy director of operations for the CIA, and you'd have him talk to people about how it is. Like Katrina, national security threat. He talked about the impact on global business. It's not about people. Of course, in this scenario, they didn't even pretend that it was about people. It was only about banks and insurance companies. You insurers are going to get walloped. You guys in the reinsurance company industry, you guys are all in for a catastrophe. You might need to plan accordingly, which is whatever that means to you. Get yourself somebody in the government who will funnel you money, so that you don't wind up as Lehman Brothers or whatever. I don't know, but figure it out. This is how it's going to be. So the presenters continued. They had Robert Webster, PhD, from St. Jude's Research Hospital. He's the Department of Infectious Disease head. They brought him in there to talk. And they brought in the director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center on the Ecology of Influenza Viruses in Lower Animals and Birds. That's a hell of a title. And I don't think that, we're going to have to say that one again, because I don't think this would fit on a business card. You would be the director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center on the Ecology of Influenza Viruses in Lower Animals and Birds.com. No, I don't know. I mean, that's a hell of a title. So, but they brought these people in, this guy in, Robert Webster, and then this other person who is the director of this long-named World Health Organization group. And what they said was that they said the H5N1 virus, which doesn't exist, has killed more than 50% of the people infected. So in this scenario, it was a real major killer, like 50%, and so what they said was that the scientists have formulated new vaccines from a new viral strain in 15 days, but they need help from politicians. So what they said in this was the scientists, quote, the scientists have performed their work, and now it's time for the political leaders to do their part. Okay. So they talked about how we have the ability. This is 2005. They're talking about this. Now, I don't know if they're making this up. I don't know if they're working on the technology now to create vaccines in less than 100 days. Wellcome Trust in the UK has spoken openly about this. But this was 20 years ago, and they're saying that that scientists have formulated new vaccines in just 15 days. That may be part of the scenario and maybe false, but whatever. Pretend that it's true. Maybe it is true. But they say that we, the scientists, we've done our part. We made the vaccine. We've got it ready to go, and it'll save all these people from this virus that kills 50% of the people that get you. We've done our part. Now it's up to the government to do theirs. So if you were the government, what would that tell you? How would you respond to that? What would your part be? Your part would be to cram it down everybody's throat, right? To open up to emergency use authorization. That would be one. Get rid of the red tape. We have an emergency on our hands, right? Clear any of that stuff out of the way that might be moral hangups, legality, possible death. Let's give this thing an emergency use authorization tag immediately so that it can skip all the testing and just go front of line. That's what they're talking about doing. So it shouldn't be no surprise to people that COVID turned out the way it did. They talked about this for a long time. It didn't catch any of these people off guard. They've been role-playing it for 2 decades before it came. All right, now it's not avian flu, but it doesn't matter. It's insert whatever new virus du jour that they're trying to scare you with. So next person on here, they had Robert Shapiro, not that one. And he was the former U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Economic Affairs, and he came out and gave a presentation focused on the economic threat caused by pandemics. Now, in 2005, that's a theoretical presentation. In 2025, we can just look back on what COVID did. We can talk about the economic threat caused by pandemics, not in theoretical terms, but in actual ones. And we can take a look at things like the supply chain that was decimated and all of the aftermarket insanity that came as a result of that. And realize that, Robert Shapiro's speech 20 years ago was probably news to these people. But now every single person that's lived through the COVID era understands the economic threat caused by pandemics. They don't need Robert Shapiro to explain it to them. And we also don't need to know that the government exacerbates things like that and makes it much worse than it has to be. Next person to present was Isaac Weisfuss, MD. It's the Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And what's interesting here was that in 2005, when they were running this scenario, this simulation, this guy proposed telecommuting as a solution for New York City residents, right? This is really kind of New York City based, this whole workshop that they were doing, because it was focused on Wall Street, and it wasn't just like it was the banks and what the banks are going to do, but also it was the logistics of being in New York City, in Wall Street, in Lower Manhattan, and having to deal with this, getting in and out, and being, are we going to be able to get to the office? Are we going to be able to do this and that? So this is the reason why you bring in like the public, like the Office of Emergency Management from New York City guy into this meeting. That's the reason why they held this simulation in New York City and not in Baltimore, because it obviously makes sense. You're talking specifically about New York City. It's probably the reason why Bulls, Bears, and Birds didn't get much play outside of that, because it wasn't a global preparation event. It was New York City preparation event. But it had global undertones, of course, because you're talking about the banks, and anywhere the banks go, it's global. But it was also specific to like New York City itself. How are we going to keep this system running? Are we going to be able to get you guys to work? Are the lights going to be on? Are the computers going to run? What's this going to look like when everything is happening? He talked about, so Isaac Weisfuss is proposing telecommunications as a solution. That's 2005. This would be like, let's all get on a conference call, maybe. But it's not going to be Zoom or Skype at this point. It's not going to look anything like that. It's not going to be FaceTime. That technology didn't exist in 2005, but it does now. And of course, telecommuting, Isaac Weisfuss, MD, you were right over the target. You were correct. This is exactly a solution to this. Telecommuting was the answer during COVID. We saw that. He talked about online transactions and self-service options instead of in person. So he's already thinking about this. And they also have something called the Health Alert Network, which is a group of doctors that he mentioned that was local inside New York City. So they brought in another guy to talk about this, a guy named Klaus Storer. And this was the World Health Organization out of Geneva. This was the Department of Communicable Disease Surveillance and Response Project Leader. Another crazy long-ass title on your business card. From the global influenza program. Not a program I'd want to be on board with, but what they're doing is he came and his presentation was on how the World Health Organization would respond to something like this, how they would, what all the countries would do globally. So again, you have New York City specific talking points for people. How are we going to keep Lower Manhattan going? And then you also have some guy from the World Health Organization who says, all right, this is what we're going to do on a global basis from the World Health Organization based in Geneva, also with offices in New York City as well. So we'll coordinate the response from that. Now, did we see that with COVID? We did. We saw the World Health Organization deeply get involved with global response. In fact, if they had it their way now, the legislation that the World Health Organization tried to pass that failed a couple months ago, but if they had it their way now, they would be a supranational entity above all nation states when influenza emergencies were declared, and they would be tabbed as the head of the response team. And in doing so, if you had signed on to this legislation, which America did not, it would put you in second position behind the World Health Organization in terms of dictating policy. Meaning, whatever the psychopaths in Geneva want you to do to your body, you would have to do. That order would come down. That would be above the laws in your country, which is insane, right? So that is the direction they want it to go. It's not there yet. They envision this. So again, not surprised that the project leader from the Department of Communicable Disease Surveillance and Response from the World Health Organization was there. Not surprised that. I am a little surprised his name was Klaus. It's a little too on the nose for me. Adolf would have been better. I don't know. Maybe next time. We'll see. But they were really just kind of focused on what the World Health Organization would do. Like, what's our response going to be? Next person on this list who's talking was a guy named David Fedson. He's a former director of medical affairs, Aventis Pasteur, MSD. So it's a big pharma company. And his talk focused on issues surrounding vaccine supplies during a pandemic. Remember, I said that the ultimate goal is vaccines. It's the solution is vaccines, and you just work backwards. So what David Fedson was talking about was that he said the world back then, 2005, the World Health Organization only had 12 people working on global pandemic preparedness, which seems a little low when you're the World Health Organization. I mean, what else are you working on? But his talk pushed the development of an antigen-sparing vaccine. And changes to the FDA to allow it to be fast-tracked. So again, they're already talking 20 plus years ago. They're already talking about how do we get these vaccines fast-tracked? You know, I know it takes 10 years and it takes all this approval and we got to go through, we have to test it on people to make sure it's safe and all those stupid things that they make us do. But what if we could just force it to market, like really quick, right? And so this is what they're talking. He's saying, look, the FDA needs to allow it. We need to have the FDA on board. Like when we get into an emergency situation, we can't have you guys fucking around taking 90 days or 290 days or whatever it is to look at our application. This has to happen immediately. In fact, frankly, we're just going to need to. We'll go around you if we have to. So he said, we got to get 9 companies to work together and resolve intellectual property issues. This is what he said. He said, the problem is that we have IP issues, intellectual property issues with these vaccines, right? And if we have a situation like a avian outbreak, now we've got business issues kind of clouding our judgment, like who owns this and who owns that and who's going to make money on this and who's going to make money on that. And what he's saying is that we need to get these 9 companies together, and I don't know which 9 he specifically mentioned, but he said that there were 9 companies in his mind. I'm assuming that they were represented there, but that's an assumption. And he says we need to plot how to roll out vaccines in a coordinated manner worldwide. And we're not going to be able to do that if we've got these companies fighting about who owns what and everything. So, Sound familiar? Where'd they get the COVID blueprint from? I mean, it sounds just like this. Two more guys, a couple guys left who are speakers. Dr. Gene Matthews, the director of public health law, he discussed issues with SARS in 2003. Now, these guys are coming off of they're just 2 years out of that, which was another respiratory virus. I don't know what you want to call SARS. Psychological operation, one of those failures to launch. It did a little bit in Asia, made some noise, but this is all media done. It's not like the bodies were stacking up necessarily, but they'd come out of that, and they're saying, well, what's the economic impact going to be on small and medium-sized businesses? So Dr. Gene Matthews was talking about that because he's director of public health law, and he was saying, like, we need to talk about what the law is going to be for small and medium-sized businesses. And I thought that was really interesting because 20 years later, or 15 years later from this, we saw what the impact would be. Small and medium-sized businesses would be targeted, because they don't have a seat at the table in these negotiations. Bob's lumber store isn't at this event, but the head of Amazon is. So that's what I'm saying. A lot of decisions were made not haphazardly. They talked about you have to understand that when COVID came and the decisions to shut down grocery stores or keep certain stores open that are deemed essential, big box retail stores for some reason, like Home Depot was open, but the lumber store down the street wasn't. And you go, God, that's so crazy. They made those decisions. But, times were nuts and decisions needed to be made quickly and, the fog of war and all that stuff. No, this was discussed in 2005, what they were going to do to small and medium-sized businesses. It wasn't some accident. It wasn't the fog of war. It was scheduled. It was talked about. It was discussed. They had a guy who flew in to New York City specifically to talk about this. Peter Sandman was there. He's a PhD risk communication specialist. He used the term stakeholders, so you automatically disqualify anything he said. If you're at this meeting, automatically you know that they're up to no good. But when you hear that word stakeholders, if somebody is trying to convince you to do something or convince you to get on board with some new project or some new idea that they have for reimagining government, and they use the term stakeholders, that is instant, automatic disqualification. It means something vastly different than what you think it does. So when I hear Peter Sandman 20 fucking years ago talking about stakeholders, which is WEF commie speak, okay? It means something else. He's frightened. Peter Sandman, understand, he's a risk communication specialist. He thinks that frightening people is the best way to motivate action. He talks about that. Now, I'm not even saying he's wrong. I'm just saying it's funny that he said that. It's ironic that he said that. Because, 15 years later, when 2020 rolls around, they will roll that same mentality and philosophy into this. Frightening people is the best way to motivate action. Is that true? Unfortunately, it is. You can tell people all day long. But if you want to get them to actually get off their ass and fucking do something, you have to scare the shit out of them. You really do. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't like that. Some people you can reason with. Some people you can tell in advance, hey, this is coming. You need to plan accordingly, right? You need to make some decisions. Other people, you tell them, hey, man, there's a fucking tsunami coming. Like the water isn't here at the beach anymore because it's piling out in the ocean, and then it's going to build into a gigantic tidal wave, and it's going to come in and everybody's going to die. You could tell some people that and it'll never click, right? They won't be able to put that together. A lot of other people, though, you're going to have to scare them to get them to move. You're going to have to show them the tidal wave. That's the only way. Conceptualizing the concept of maybe water goes away and it pools into this thing and you can't see it, but this is how the function. None of that is going to make any sense to them. They're not going to connect with that. The only time it's going to make sense is when that tidal wave is coming right down their street. Then it's going to be, oh, I'm in trouble. And they know this. And they know how we think. They know how we operate. They know how the majority of people will just sit there and wait to do what they're told. He thinks in the aftermath, this is Peter Sandman, PhD, risk communication specialist. He thinks that in the aftermath, the focus can shift to helping these people deal or cope with this fear. But it's the fear that he created. So he's saying we need to create fear to motivate the dumb people to actually do something. And then in the aftermath, we'll help them manage the aftermath of that fear. That's what he's saying. And I would love to say that Peter Sandman is wrong. Unfortunately, he just is better at describing human psychology than most people are willing to accept. And the truth is that as awful as it is for him to say that, his job was to go there and deliver a message to people who actually know what the fuck is going on, which is the reason why he said the best way to motivate people is to terrify them. Because everybody sitting in that meeting knows that he's right. And they're also part of that. And this is about terrifying people, to motivate them to take action. Now, the trick is to make them take the action that you want them to take. Now, of course, in this case, the action that they want you to take is to vaccinate yourself. That's it. That's what they want you to do. So, which is the reason why they bring in all these people to talk about the different ways in which they're going to manage this emergency that they themselves created. They brought in the director of regional continuity, Deutsche Bank, Singapore, and this guy named Kenny Tsao. He suggested that banks define what he called trigger points for when contingency plans should be operated. So it's like banks need to know when they're the irony of a guy from Deutsche Bank talking about trigger points in continuity. It's like, bro, your bank is a house of cards that is rigged with detonators, ready to go down, and a guy leaning on the plunger. And you're going to talk about continuity? I don't know. So anyway, we'll wrap with this because there were some solutions. And of course, they're not good ones, right? But the solutions to these tabletop exercises are always more vaccines, always and faster, right? More vaccines and faster. And the only question is the distribution channels, right? How are we going to get them to the people in a timely manner? And so Thomas Inglesby will make sure of that. You know, he's the guy in charge of that. He's got a background in infectious disease trainings from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, Bloomberg School of Public Health. They were the king of the lockdowns, if you recall. This was the group that instigated the lockdowns. And his background, you know, Thomas Inglesby, the guy who's creating all of these things, DARPA, Event 201, Atlantic Storm, Catastrophic Contagion, which was African kids with vaccines, Operation Dark Winter, featuring Steven Seagal. No, wait. I feel like Steven Seagal... Did Steven Seagal ever do a movie called Operation Dark Winter? Because if he didn't, he should. And I'm almost convinced that every movie he's ever done has 3 names, 3 words in it. It's marked for death. It's the same thing. OBDM did a great bit on this. I think anybody who wants to get more information on Steven Seagal should definitely be listening to our Big Dumb Mouth podcast, the funniest podcast in the world. But I noticed this with Operation Dark Winter. I was like, man, I feel like, did I rent that on DVD? Is that the one where Seagal's fat, or is that a different one? I don't know. They're all blurring together for me. Anyway, but look, the reason why I bring this up and the reason why we talk about bulls, bears, and birds in these simulations, in Atlantic Storm, in Event 201, and all this is because it's very unusual that you get the co-conspirators to all sit down in one place on camera, announce themselves, and they don't have, they're not wearing masks and doing it with a straight face, presumably because they think there'll be no repercussions for this. But these people are deeply involved in plotting what happens to this planet. And these scenarios of global pandemics are mostly horseshit invented by the people like this that have controls over the methods of distributing the news to you. They control what you see and how you feel about what you see. And they're also deeply involved in the medical industry, so they can convince you into operating against your own self-interest simply by scaring the shit out of you. And if you think that's not a strategy, literally the risk communication specialist said he thought it was the great strategy. So it's definitely what they're doing. So if you're like, feeling a little bit fearful because of all this, just understand they want you to feel that way. They want you to feel that way. This is where the co-conspirators lay out their plan, where they establish the hierarchy, the chain of command for how this is going to roll out, and they conspire to commit global mass murder and then the subsequent cover-up. I mean, these are people talk about conspiracy theorists and everything. Oh, these people get together and conspire? Yeah. All the time, actually. And they leave meeting notes, and there's videos of it, and you'd think they'd be secret about it. But they're not, because it's right out in the open for anybody with the eyes to see it. And so for any of your friends out there, family members that want to debate you on this and tell you, oh, you with your ideas and your conspiracy theories, and you can watch the video of Event 201. And I know this because I've watched it. So this is not conspiracy theorizing, this is conspiracy analysis, and the information is there for those that have the eyes to see it. But I think that when they get together in these groups, what they're really saying is, look, the best way to kill large groups of people, and depopulation and eugenics is always at the core of this, is to blame it on nature. Let's make it look like it's not us. It's just these random wild viruses that mutate, and then boom, the right sort of circumstances come together, and you're in a wet market in Shanghai, and next thing you know, you had low vitamin D, and you ate that, you took that bat home and you ate it, and then you started feeling a little sick, and then everybody in your building got sick. This is the bullshit sales pitch that they will use to scare you. But they love it because as long as it's some random virus out there that's killing people indiscriminately, you can't pin it on them, of course, right? That's the cover story. And it's important to always have a cover story. Practice makes perfect. Revelation of the method matters. There's going to be more of these events out there, but they always tell us in advance what they're going to do. Prepare accordingly. Hey, if you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. Macroaggressions.io is the website. Give us 5 stars if you think we've earned it, which I think we have. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you again soon.